Hey everybody, my name is Graham Elwood. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. A great way to support the show is go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood, where you can do a video interview, Skype, conversation, Zoom, whatever you want to call it, like Jackson Facks here. Jackson, thank you so much for supporting the show and taking your time today to talk to us.
Of course. Thanks for inviting me to have a chat with you, Graham. This is a great service that you offer to your Patreon members to be able to do this interview.
Well, thanks. Yeah, one of the things I say to the viewers is like, you're all political vigilantes and you're all out there, learning information. I'm just one guy, so many of you have brought stuff to my attention that I can then share to a wider audience. So it's pretty important. It's a great on both ends. So I had done recently a video about 5G that was submitted by another Patreon supporter, and you've been talking about that. You have your own YouTube channel, and you wanted to discuss that. What are you seeing in research that you've come across with 5G?
I've seen some pretty startling things. I mean, first off, I got to say how impressed I am with your ability to cover such a broad range of topics.
Oh, thank you.
It's so important and so hard to find people who are progressive information resources that are touching on all the hard-hitting stuff, from the child sex trafficking to the animal agriculture industry. You were touching on global dimming, the whole chemtrail thing with your interview with Natural Progressive. That's so important, so important. And then, of course, 5G. But I'm noticing with, we know with the FCC, Ajit Pai, the head of the FCC, was originally a lawyer for Verizon before he became head of the FCC. So a little bit of corruption there, some conflict.
Yeah, just a little bit, that a telecom person is in charge of the FCC. Just a hair.
Right. So we also had that Harvard study that came out not long ago saying that the FCC is funded by the same multi-international corporations that it's supposed to be regulating. So there's some more corruption there. Now the FCC, it was back in September of last year, made a new rule. It's a law that restricts each city's ability to actually vote on whether or not they even want these 5G devices, in their neighborhoods, right outside their homes. So now down here at the Grassroots, people are going to their city council meetings and saying, hey, we need to fight this. This isn't what America is about. We're supposed to be able to choose. It's actually against our Constitution to not be able to even choose whether or not there's harmful devices being put, in our environment. And city council members are responding across the board saying, our hands are tied. We don't have the financial resources or otherwise to fight the FCC. They have an ocean of lawyers and bottomless pits of money. There's no way that a lot of these cities are able to take the FCC to court. And even if they do, in this new rule that the FCC has made, they made it to where it's not allowed for the city to bring any peer-reviewed data about the health risks and environmental risks of the 5G. All of the health concern and safety research has to be brought forth by the FCC and their corporate affiliates. So they're the ones that get the final say in court as to what's actually safe for us, even though we have the FDA, the EPA, the National Institute of Occupational Health and Safety, the Air Force, the Pentagon, the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the U.S. Department of Interior, the World Health Organization, just to name a few institutions and organizations who have peer-reviewed data showing us beyond a shadow of a doubt this kind of technology is extremely harmful. A lot of people will say, in the corporate mainstream media, they'll tell you, there hasn't been enough research done yet. We need to do more research before we figure it out. Let's just ask the FCC to do a little bit more research. No. There's plenty of research available to us, going over 20 different countries, thousands and thousands of reports done by reputable institutions and organizations. So it's important that research gets brought to the surface, brought to the limelight, so the people know exactly what this technology is capable of. The Pentagon actually made this technology back in the 50s as a crowd control weapon. And they tested it on dogs. Yeah, you can check this out. The Pentagon, they told us this. They tested it on dogs, and it was reported it was over 100 dogs melted instantaneously after being exposed to this weapon, this 5G type of weapon. So the quote from the Pentagon's papers were, it was reported to melt the eyeballs of its victims. not fun, not fun stuff, not the kind of thing you want filling the streets of your neighborhood, 15, 20 feet on the street outside your home. Very dangerous stuff.
Well, that's there's so many issues with 5G. And first of all, is what you're talking about. All these organizations, I mean, the Pentagon, not exactly a bunch of tree hugging hippies over there, saying that this is, this is dangerous. And the health effects, and and they're acting like, oh, we just need to do a little more research, like you said, but that's sort of typical. This is how it works. The telecom corp, a big corp, in anything, the big corporations start buying out. They put people in Congress, in the Senate, in organizations like the FCC or the EPA or whatever, and then they just start slowly eviscerating the laws and representative democracy and public oversight. And it's really, and they're so skilled at it and they spend so much money on it. The thing that's so mind-boggling to me is that, do they not know that this could hurt them and their families? Like the telecom companies, their kids could get affected by this. I mean, that's what's so astounding to me. Just for your own selfish self-preservation, you're using something that's dangerous for you.
Right. Right, we're seeing that across the board with the collapse of the environment. The whole ecosystem is crumbling at the seams. The earth is falling apart into tiny little pieces, and the elite don't seem to care. They seem to have been aware that this was happening and that imminent collapse was coming, and they didn't care. They knew all along. I just did a video recently called "NASA Imperialists Are Proudly Pillaging the Galaxy," where this video that NASA put out talks about how proud they are that the elite are leaving the planet in 2030 to go right around the time the whole ecosystem set to collapse, to go colonize the moon and then colonize Mars and beyond. They're very proud. They said this is just the beginning of the new frontier for us wealthy, imperial colonizationists that are going around with our industrialized imperialism, harvesting the natural resources of everything in the entire galaxy and beyond. So that, to me, it sends up a red flag. I go, okay, this explains a little bit of why they don't care. They're not worried. They're going to be taking their families, all these aristocracies, these royal bloodlines that have been ruling our livelihood all over the planet for hundreds, thousands of years. They've had these plans set in motion. They're planning on leaving. They're going to leave us all behind to rot on a dying planet. So I always urge people, stop waiting around for a corrupt government to make the world a better place for you. They don't care. They're not concerned. They have the resources and the knowledge to just leave whenever they need to, even if it's just to go into low orbit for a bit and come back down after shit hits the fan and re-terraform the environment to be more stable again. They can totally do that. They have the technology and resources. That's not a problem for them. So we here at the Grassroots, the 90 to 99% of us, need to start pulling together to fight back. We don't realize, most of us are so caught up with our day-to-day lives and getting sick and working 9 to 5 and trying to keep a roof over your head and the lights on and food on the table, healthy food for your friends and family, that we don't really focus on the bigger picture, that we have given our power away. It's been taken by the elite few, the top 1 to 10%. We don't realize that we own that power. We have an innate right as the 90 to 99% to have control over our lives and our environment. So people need to wake up and take that power back. Once we do that, it doesn't matter whether they leave or not, we can start building the type of societies that we want to actually live in. We can start making permaculture food forests. So we're living in a Garden of Eden, and there's food everywhere readily available. We can start building affordable housing units out of recycled materials, sustainable materials. They have those cool tiny homes and aircrete homes, all sorts of ways that you can, do-it-yourself methods for building self-sufficient lifestyles. Once we start doing that, then we're going to see a sea change in how society functions, how culture functions, and we're at that tipping point. So I think we're going to do that out of necessity, no matter what. We have about 10 years or less until we start facing the beginning of irreversible human extinction. So I think just out of necessity, the people are going to start getting together, realizing that we can fight the system.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, and it's like what's happening in Australia is just absolutely horrifying, and the one little silver lining is I think the whole world is going, oh, wow, like this could happen anywhere. Like, oh, Australia's always had fires. That's what they said 3-4 months ago. This is just a bad fire season. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I did a video on that. Took the map that they superimposed. Australia landmass is about the same size as the continental United States. And I showed all the fire areas, and I'm like, oh, there's at least a dozen, 10 to 20 states that would just be up in smoke, gone, if fires like that happened here. And I mean, I just living in California, we had awful fires 2 years ago, and they're nothing compared to what they're having in Australia. And I'm like, what happens if the San Fernando Valley goes up, the Hollywood Hills goes up, Los Angeles is up? Like, what happens if, an urban center of 5 million people just goes up in smoke? What are we going to do? And that's happening all throughout the state and all throughout Nevada and Arizona, and every fire department is tapped. What's that going to look like? And I think people are starting to realize this. And, one of the things when I try to talk about a lot on this show is that there are a lot of solutions out there. You named it for like permaculture. I don't think people are aware of how amazing permaculture is, how easy it is to set up. It won't take this massive overhaul infrastructure. Like, you could go into any big city that has abandoned buildings or warehouses or whatever, and put in a permaculture in there like that and have urban farming immediately. But I want to get back to the 5G thing. So how can people that are watching this that are just like, well, I didn't know 5G was this bad. I did the video showing the power drain, the resources it's going to take just for the servers. That was pretty eye-opening for me. But also all of the health risks that they're hiding and they're covering up. What can people do? Because we're all using it. Like, we're using telecommunications right now to have this conversation. We all have smartphones, laptops, all that stuff. What can everybody just on an individual and daily level do to help combat this?
Yeah, I would start by advising that people go to their local Stop 5G Facebook groups. Not a huge fan of Facebook, but it seems to be a great platform if used in the right way to create a little bit of social justice and awakening for people. That functions as a great resource, so people can go through their local group and see if there's any events happening where they can engage with city council members, where they can take legal action and sign petitions. There's some cities who have done an emergency ordinance that restricts how close to a home the FCC or these telecom companies can put a 5G unit, a cell tower. But I mean, that's still not great. These devices still cause the degradation of plant life. They destroy the bee, the insect population and the birds. We had a bunch of people just recently who were living next to a 5G tower who saw hundreds of birds. They took photos and video, it's all online. Hundreds of birds just fall from the sky instantly when they came near this 5G tower. Hundreds of them at once. They're not sick, okay? They're not, there's no impact. They didn't hit anything. They just fell from the sky. And this is happening all over the world all the time. So when people start looking into it, they start noticing, start reporting these things, documenting them with their phones, then we can hopefully put a little more heat on the FCC to get them to stop. But really, I mean, we also need to be voting progressives into places of power so they can forcefully stop the FCC. We need the federal government to have progressives in it, so that way they're not allowed to have this much control over our daily lives.
That's a great point, and it's a thing, and I say this all the time, and I will continue to say it. It starts on a local level. When you get progressives on your local city council, on your school board, or whatever, then the local issue, I mean, 5G is a national and an international issue, but it's also a local issue because it takes local laws and ordinances and politicians to get that cell tower up there. So to your point, that's why it is so important to have progressives on your local city council, in your state government, your state assembly, your state house. A lot of people don't even realize that their state has a Senate and a Congress, just like we do on a federal level. And those politicians are equally, in some cases, more so important to your daily life. I always talk about, everyone gets all, we look at the presidential election like the Olympics. It's every 4 years. It's this big thing. But it's really your local politicians and making sure they're not bought and paid for by telecommunication companies, and they're actually fighting for the interests of the citizenry, because that's where that's where it's happening. Those 100 birds that fell out of the sky, that was somebody's neighborhood where that happened. So that means local law, local politicians can have a say in that. And we're starting to see cities, states passing more progressive, like medical marijuana, and now recreational marijuana is a fine example, right? So all this started with the medical marijuana movement, then some states started to go recreational marijuana, and what that helps do, and I'm just pointing this out to the viewer, of why getting involved on a local level and getting local progressives is so important. So now it's a matter of time before marijuana is decriminalized on a federal level. So to the issue with 5G, and we've talked about this, I've talked to Ron Placone on the show about Gail McLaughlin, right? She lived in a little small town in California where Chevron basically owned, it was like a 10-person city council or something like that. And they had something like 7 of 10 seats that were the oil company, and they passed all these laws. So she got in there progressively, 1 seat at a time, got these oil people out, and got Chevron, they lost their power in that town. So this is how everybody out there, how you can get involved. We all want, a big progressive president to come in and do sweeping top-down reform, which we would love to see, and I'm a big advocate for that. But it's also, so I always say this, like, let's say if you're a big Bernie supporter and he becomes the president, then what? If he doesn't have a bunch of progressives in the House and the Senate and governors and everybody else, it's going to be hard. And this is you see it. You saw Trump said he was going to drain the swamp, and he just has stacked. His entire cabinet was all filled with climate change deniers, all money from the oil lobby and all that other stuff. So I'm giving all of these different examples to show to the viewer out there why it's so critical on a local level, why those little progressive wins, and on the state level and on the federal level, why they're so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also tell people to get educated, to do their research, and check out resources like ehtrust.org. It's environmentalhealthtrust.org, as great resources on how to legislatively go against the FCC to stop the 5G rollout, how to take preventative measures in your own day-to-day life. For example, when you're using your Wi-Fi, you can hook up directly with a wire. So, avoiding wireless frequencies can be a great way to save yourself from those carcinogenic radioactive frequencies. You can also practice a healthy diet. Lifestyle is so important for preventing these things. Your body knows how to fight off toxins and weird shit in your environment, but you have to feed yourself the right nutrients. You have to get, healthy, whole food, plant-based diet is ideal, but getting a good amount of fresh air and sunlight and a little bit of activity. A lot of people don't do this because they're so swamped from working 24/7. Taking care of their families, keeping a roof over their head, all those other things I was mentioning before, that they neglect their own health, when it's actually really easy to just look after yourself. A whole food, plant-based diet, it's never been more readily available. You can optimize your health significantly and avoid some of the adverse health effects.
It's also, you bring up a great point, and to this overall conversation we're having of how one positive action has numerous positive effects. So you're talking about a plant-based life that's good to help prevent and against any sort of toxin or carcinogens being digested. But it also, as we talked to, I had Dr. John McDougall on the show, a plant-based life is actually better for the environment. It is better for helping slow down, stop, and even reverse climate change. So that is like, look at that, the solutions. I always say this, like a real Green New Deal, within it, the solutions can fix a myriad of problems. And thank you for giving us those websites and resources for people to use. I'll put those, tell me that again, the EH what?
ehtrust.org, environmentalhealthtrust.org.
Okay. ehtrust.org. I'll put that in the show notes, everybody. And as Jackson said, also go to the Stop 5G, get involved and learn about it. I'm learning about it because folks such as yourself and Faye Edelstein and other people out there, political vigilantes that support the Patreon, are making me more aware of this. So that's good for all of us. Jackson, what else are you seeing from the show that you're doing that is related to 5G and that we maybe might not be aware of, that they're not letting us know about?
Well, the smart grid in general is something that we should all be very well aware of. There's different aspects of the smart grid. It encompasses a lot of things. They're calling it the Internet of Things. You know, smart refrigerators, smart cars, even smarter phones. When in reality, these things aren't actually all that smart. They're just destructive and in a lot of ways unsustainable. So smart meters are another one that they're just as bad as 5G. And PG&E is going in, breaking and entering into people's homes to get into their little meter, energy meter, to switch it out for a smart meter. And it's so dangerous. It's dangerous for the environment. It's dangerous for human health and animals, especially children. And we're living right next to these energy meters all the time. They're right up against our walls outside our house. And then you start to look into more condensed populations, like in inner cities and downtown areas. It's just house after house, every 20 feet with a smart meter. You're exponentially increasing your chances of having adverse health effects. So people can go and actually call PG&E and have them remove the smart meter. A lot of people, when they go to look at their meter, they find, I didn't even know I had a smart meter. When did PG&E do this? They're so sneaky about it, and they don't have to ask permission. They just come right in and do it. But PG&E actually charges you a fee, a monthly fee for a number of years to keep your smart meter off the property, which is extortion. So this is saying, if you don't want to be harmed by this, destructive technology, you're going to have to pay us. They're going to have to pay us for it. So yeah, it's just run-of-the-mill, corruption from these big utilities companies. But that's another one. The whole smart grid in general is something we need to keep an eye out for. There's a couple points in Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal, which is a phenomenal Green New Deal, of course, addresses almost every facet of our crumbling infrastructure and the environment. But there's some things in there, you can tell there are people in his ear saying, oh, this is going to be good for the environment, when in reality, obviously requires a little bit more research for him to come to the understanding that no, a smart grid isn't going to help. It's not going to save us. We need to start developing self-sufficient ways of living. And we have the technology to do this. We don't need to be using harmful frequencies to transfer data to each other. We can be using natural frequencies, like the geologic ley lines of the Earth itself. We have Nikola Tesla, who had developed technology like this, where you could transfer data and energy using the natural energy of the Earth itself, like the way birds use and bees to navigate the geomagnetic energy of the Earth. So we don't have to do this. And they want us to think that we need them and their self-destructive societal structures in order to live a luxurious, fruitful lives. And in reality, we don't need them at all. So yeah, just keeping an eye out for when you hear the term smart grid, I mean, you see groups like Extinction Rebellion. The owner or the founder, Gail Bradbrook, has a lot of ties to telecommunications companies.
Really?
Just follow the money. A lot of her close friends and people funding her charitable organizations are big tech oligarchs and think tanks pushing for 5G. And that's concerning to see that they're not addressing that as an issue, being Extinction Rebellion, kind of the probably biggest group at the forefront right now globally that's calling out for some climate justice. So just things like that, once the people educate themselves and they realize, okay, we don't need this smart grid, whatever the hell that means. I don't need to text my refrigerator to know how my broccoli is doing. It's just unnecessary.
So you're broccoli shaming. You say you hate broccoli. No, I get it. We'll cut to a commercial. Right. No, you bring up a valid point, because I've heard the thing about smart grid, because I've definitely in some of my research with the environment and a Green New Deal, I've heard that our electric grid is outdated and does need to be updated. But you're saying the telecommunications companies are using that as an excuse to put this specific smart grid in there, which isn't very safe, and it uses 5G.
Precisely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Man, I'm glad you came on the show, because now I know that. Now I will make that clarification when I talk about fixing our electric grid. Be careful of smart. I've had several people email me about Extinction Rebellion. I see, they seem like a pretty cool organization, but then I'm hearing more and more about this ties to the woman is in charge of it, and that's a little disconcerting. I bet you there's a bunch of people involved in Extinction Rebellion that all have their hearts in the right place and want to get something done and might not even be aware of that.
Totally. That's how most of these organizations get co-opted. You know, it's a very hierarchical structure. You know, they have this pyramid of a very elite few at the top, and most of the people at the bottom have no idea. The information is consolidated in this way, so that you think you're doing something good and just for the world when actually you're feeding into this propaganda or this co-opted cause. But as long as the people, like I was saying before, down at the grassroots, the majority of us stay educated and keep fighting for whatever we believe in, whatever we think is moral and just in the world, then nothing can stop us. No amount of co-opting or elites trying to push a nefarious agenda and use us to continue, you know, pushing their propaganda can stop us. And as long as we're on the right side of history and we just stand by what we feel is important in our hearts, then yeah.
Well, Jackson, thank you so much, man, for bringing your crazy socialism on the show. I mean, it's really, I think obviously you hate America and broccoli. Now we found out. But no, seriously, man. So tell everybody what your YouTube show is and what kind of general subjects you cover, including this one, obviously, and where they can find you online.
Yeah, my YouTube channel is Jackson Facks. I cover a wide range of topics inspired by folks like yourself. A few years ago, I decided to just start touching on all the things that I thought were important. We cover politics, culture, nature, science, entertainment, stuff going on in the entertainment industry. We also talk a lot about conspiracies and try to tease apart the facts from the fiction. We have a U-News, which is viewer curated news, whatever you guys want to hear about. The viewers let me know and I try to give my analysis. We also have life hacks and self-wellness advice that we go through. There's a lot of stuff. And then I have another channel where I just do activism, a lot of animal rights, grassroots, boots on the ground activism, just going around to climate rallies and going to colleges and asking kids what they think they can do to better themselves and better the planet. And that channel is Action Jackson. So Jackson Facts and Action Jackson. Between the two, there's lots of information, something for everyone out there. So check it out.
Jackson Facks or Action Jackson, ladies and gentlemen. Check it out. Like I said, I'll put a link to that tell me that again.
ehtrust.org. A lot of great resources.
Trust. I'm going to write that down right now so that we know exactly, so I don't mess that up. ehtrust.org. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching the show. Like, share, and subscribe. Put these videos out there. If you have a YouTube channel and you want people to know about it and have discussions like this, you can do what Jackson did and go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood. It's a great way to support the show and get more information out that I didn't have. Now you have it, thanks to Jackson, a Patreon member. Also go to rockfin.com/Graham Elwood and then visit Ron Placone and I on the road for the Progressive Comedy Tour. Tucson, February 8th, San Francisco, February 29th. We go to Florida in March, and Seattle and Portland in April, and Indy, Detroit, and Cleveland in May, and more tour dates for 2020. Go to GrahamElwood.com. Jackson, thank you so much for being on the show. Shave your knuckles for justice, brother.